Sometimes the deepest cuts in life don't come from enemies or even from strangers who wish us harm. They come from the people we love most, the ones we expect to stand firmly by our side no matter what. And when that trust is broken, when you realize you've been written out of your own family's story, it doesn't feel like anger at first. It feels like emptiness, like your place in the world has been quietly erased. That's what happened to me. It started with something that should have been beautiful, something meant to celebrate love and unity. My parents' wedding anniversary, 40 years together, an entire lifetime of shared memories. My siblings and I, along with cousins, aunts, uncles, and even neighbors, had been planning a big celebration. Everyone was excited. My parents had always prided themselves on being the glue of the family, the ones who kept everyone connected. They loved traditions, they loved symbols, and they loved the idea of family legacy. So, when they announced that they had commissioned a custom-painted family tree to be unveiled at the anniversary party, no one was surprised. It sounded like the perfect gift to themselves, a piece of art that would capture all the generations, all the names and faces, beautifully preserved on canvas. What none of us knew was just how much weight that painting would carry. And for me, it carried something that changed everything. The night of the anniversary was warm and golden, like the air itself had been dressed up for the occasion. The backyard was strung with little white lights. Tables were covered in linen. My parents were glowing, holding hands like two young people just starting out, instead of two elders nearing the later chapters of life. Relatives I hadn't seen in years had flown in. My sisters were buzzing around, making sure the catering was in order. My brother was fussing over the slideshow of old photos. The whole night felt drenched in nostalgia, the kind of event where you catch yourself smiling at memories you didn't even realize you'd held on to. I felt proud, honestly. Proud to be part of it all, proud to belong. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for, the unveiling of the family tree. The artist had created something breathtaking, a tall, sprawling tree painted in deep greens and browns, with branches stretching wide across a pale background. Each branch held names, hand-lettered in elegant script, representing generations of our family. Over 100 names, stretching back into great-grandparents and great-uncles, down through cousins and siblings, all the way to the newest babies, just a few months old. Everyone gasped when they saw it. Applause broke out. My mother wiped away tears. My father put an arm around her shoulder, proud and content. People crowded closer, searching for their names, laughing when they found them, tracing the lines of their family connections with fingertips. I smiled too, until I looked closer, and my name wasn't there. At first, I thought maybe I had just missed it. The names were carefully placed, but there were so many. I scanned the branches again, tracing where my parents' names branched into their children. I found my older sister, then my brother, then my younger sister. Even my cousin's children, toddlers barely old enough to spell their own names, were there. My siblings' spouses were included too, their names delicately inked in smaller branches. But not me. Not my name. Not even a blank space where it should have been. It was as if I didn't exist at all, as if the tree had grown without me and no one had noticed. I stood there, quietly staring, my chest tightening with each passing second. People around me were laughing, pointing, celebrating. No one else seemed to notice what I was seeing. Not yet. It wasn't until my younger cousin, a teenager with sharp eyes, pointed and asked, "Hey, where's your name?" that the silence started to creep in. Heads turned. Eyes moved from the painting to me. A small ripple of confusion spread through the group. My siblings leaned in, frowning, muttering about how strange it was. My mother's smile faltered. My father cleared his throat. And I just stood there, forcing a smile I didn't feel, because I didn't want to ruin their anniversary, not with my pain. After that, The night became a blur. My parents insisted it must have been a mistake. They claimed the artist must have overlooked it somehow, or that maybe my name had been accidentally left off the list when they submitted all the information. But I knew better. The tree wasn't missing anyone else. Not one. It wasn't sloppy. It wasn't incomplete. It was deliberate. And if I'm honest, this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. I've always been different. The odd one out in my family. Not rebellious, not irresponsible, just not like the others. My siblings all followed similar paths. Jobs my parents approved of, lives that fit the mold. I took a different direction. I pursued work that mattered to me but didn't impress them. I had views they considered unconventional. I spoke my mind when silence was expected. And in subtle ways, over the years, they pushed me further out of the picture. Not openly, not cruelly, just small exclusions that piled up until suddenly, here I was, standing in front of a family tree where I didn't exist. That painting was more than art. It was a declaration, a public announcement that, in my parents' eyes, I wasn't really part of the family, not in the way that counted. And while I smiled that night, while I hugged them and thanked them for hosting such a beautiful celebration, inside me something broke. But something else was born too. Not anger exactly, not the hot kind that burns fast and fades. No, what was born inside me was colder, steadier, a calm understanding that if my family had written me out of their story, then I would write my own, that I would show them, not through shouting or fights, but through patience, dignity, and action, that erasing me was their biggest mistake. Revenge, after all, doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes, the quiet kind lasts the longest. That night, when I left the party, I didn't slam doors or make speeches. I drove home in silence, but I started planning. Not in a vengeful frenzy, but with the kind of clarity that comes only after you've been deeply wounded. I knew one thing: if they wanted me erased, then I would make myself unforgettable. And not by begging for their acknowledgement, but by building a life so undeniably strong, so visible, that even they would have no choice to recognize what they had tried to erase. The family tree may have left my name off its branches, but I would plant my own, and mine would flourish in ways they could never ignore. After that anniversary night, I carried a kind of silence inside me, not the awkward kind that happens in a pause between conversations, but the heavy kind that wraps around you and forces you to look inward. I kept replaying the moment in my head, standing in front of that glowing canvas, searching for my name, and realizing it wasn't there. My parents' expressions as they stumbled for excuses, my relatives' whispers, the way everyone quickly moved on, as though erasing someone from the tree wasn't such a big deal. But for me, it was everything. And the thing about being written out of your family's history is that it changes how you see yourself. At first, I felt smaller, like maybe they were right to leave me out. Maybe I didn't belong. Maybe my life didn't measure up to theirs. Those thoughts lingered in the corners of my mind, pulling at me like shadows. Yet with time, something shifted. Instead of letting the hurt consume me, I decided to reshape it. To treat that missing name not as proof that I was nothing, but as proof that I had everything to build. If my family tree didn't have space for me, then I would create my own roots, my own branches, and I would do it quietly, calmly, deliberately. Not to beg for their approval, but to make myself undeniable. The first step was focus. I had always drifted a little, moving between jobs, exploring things that interested me, but never really planting myself in one place. I had talent, but no stability. And I realized, if I wanted to make my mark, I needed to stop scattering my energy and choose a path to grow deep in. I asked myself, what do I want to be remembered for? Not just by my family, but by the world. What work or legacy would make me proud, even if no one clapped for it. For me, the answer was writing. Words had always been my strength, my way of making sense of the world. So I leaned into it. I started waking up early, setting aside hours each day to write. At first, it was messy. Half-finished essays, personal reflections, ideas scribbled on napkins. But slowly, I began shaping them into something more structured. Articles, stories, essays with clear voices. I submitted them anywhere I could. Small blogs, online magazines, local newsletters. Rejections came, of course, but so did little victories. A piece published here, another there. People began reaching out, saying my writing had touched them, made them think differently, given them comfort. That was when I realized something important. While my family had erased my name from their tree, strangers were remembering it. And in a way, that felt even more powerful. But revenge isn't about rushing ahead, about dramatic gotcha moments. At least, not the kind of revenge I wanted. Mine was the calm kind, the kind that unfolded slowly, quietly, until one day the people who dismissed you realized just how much they had underestimated you. So I didn't tell my family about my writing. I didn't brag about it or send them links. I just worked and let the results speak in their own time. Meanwhile, I made changes in other parts of my life too. I started saving money more seriously, setting goals for myself. I focused on my health, not in a showy way, but in the steady, disciplined way that transforms you from the inside out. I reconnected with a few old friends, the kind who actually valued me, who reminded me that I mattered. And slowly, day by day, I felt myself growing stronger. It was almost like I was quietly watering my own tree, branch by branch, even though no one else could see it yet. Months turned into a year. My parents never brought up the missing name again. They never apologized beyond the flimsy excuse that the artist must have made a mistake. But their silence said everything. To them, the family tree wasn't broken. It was exactly as they wanted it to be, and I had no place on it. That used to hurt, but with time, I noticed the pain dulled. Because while they erased me on canvas, I was writing myself into places they couldn't touch. By the second year, I had built a small but loyal following online through my writing. People subscribed to my newsletter, shared my essays, invited me to speak at small events. My work was being quoted, reposted, even translated. It wasn't fame, but it was influence. It was connection. It was impact. And here's the beautiful irony. My family, the very people who had excluded me, started stumbling across my work without realizing it. A cousin shared one of my articles on Facebook, not even noticing the byline until later. An aunt quoted one of my lines at a family dinner, saying, "I read this and thought it was so true," without realizing those were my words. Quietly, invisibly, my voice was weaving its way back into the family, even if my name wasn't on the painting. Still, I didn't forget what happened. Calm revenge is about patience, but it's also about remembering why you began. The turning point came during another family gathering, a cousin's wedding. I attended, though I wasn't sure if I wanted to, but I went, dressed simply, carrying myself with quiet confidence. At one point, I was chatting with a few relatives when someone said, "You know, I read this article the other day about resilience and self-worth, and it reminded me of you." They pulled out their phone, scrolling quickly, then stopped. And there it was, my article. My name at the top, clear as day. Their eyes widened. "Wait, this is you?" Others leaned in, curious. Suddenly, the air shifted. People began asking questions, talking about the piece, telling me how much it resonated. And I just smiled, calmly, and said, "Yes, that's me." I didn't need to boast. I didn't need to rub it in. The work spoke for itself. But across the room, I caught sight of my parents. Their faces told me everything, a mix of surprise, discomfort, and something else they hadn't shown me in years: recognition. For the first time, they saw me not as the odd one out, but as someone who had built something real. And here's the thing: I didn't want revenge in the form of making them beg for forgiveness or admitting they were wrong. That would have been too easy, too shallow. My revenge was about existing so fully, so undeniably, that erasing me became impossible. That family tree painting may still not have my name on it, but every day since then, I've been planting seeds in places no brushstroke can cover, in the lives of readers who find comfort in my words, in the quiet respect of relatives who now look at me differently, in the steady growth of a life I can be proud of. Revenge, I've learned, doesn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it's simply living well, building quietly, and letting the results speak when the time is right. And as I left that wedding, I realized something. The painting may always be missing my name, but in their hearts, in their memories, in the spaces where influence lingers, I had written myself back in. Not as a forgotten branch, but as a tree of my own. The funny thing about revenge is that, when it's calm, it doesn't feel like revenge in the way people usually imagine it. There's no grand scene, no dramatic confrontation, no one collapsing under the weight of their guilt while you stand victorious. Instead, it unfolds slowly, like the tide reshaping the shoreline. You don't notice the change all at once, but eventually, the whole landscape looks different. By the third year after my parents' anniversary, my life had become unrecognizable. Not to them, but to me. I had a steady rhythm. My writing had grown beyond just articles and essays. I'd published a book, modest in its reach, but deeply meaningful to those who read it. I'd been invited to speak at universities, not because I sought attention, but because people genuinely valued my perspective. Financially, I was stable in a way I hadn't been before, able to support myself with dignity and without leaning on anyone. I had carved out a space in the world that was mine, with roots and branches growing in every direction. And the more I built, the less I cared about the family tree that had excluded me. But the universe has a way of circling back. One afternoon, I got a call from my sister. She sounded hesitant, the way people do when you're about to ask something they don't know how you'll take. After a bit of small talk, she finally said, "Mom and Dad want to commission an update to the family tree. They want to add the new grandkids. And they asked about you." For a moment, I didn't answer. I let her words hang there, tasting the weight of them. They asked about you. 4 years ago, my existence hadn't mattered enough to be painted onto a canvas. Now, suddenly, it did. I could imagine the scene. My parents, older now, flipping through photos of their growing family, realizing that time was slipping by. Realizing that leaving someone out wasn't as simple as crossing a name off a list. Especially when that someone had built a life visible to more people than they could count. I kept my voice calm, even. "What did you tell them?" My sister sighed. "I told them they should have added you in the first place, that it was wrong not to. They said they regret how it happened. They want to make it right." In that moment, I realized something important. I didn't need their apology. Not really. I had already done the hard work of healing, of proving to myself that I was enough. My revenge had already bloomed, in my achievements, my independence, my sense of self. Whether or not they added me to a painting didn't define me anymore. But it did matter to them, and in a way, that was the final piece of the puzzle. So I said calmly, "If they want to add me now, that's their choice. But I don't need it. I'm not doing this for recognition. I already know who I am." She was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "I know, but I think they need to do it." The updated tree was unveiled at another family gathering a few months later, not as grand as the anniversary, just a smaller dinner at my parents' house. I wasn't sure I wanted to go, but curiosity tugged me there. The new painting was hung on the wall, bigger than before, branches stretching wider to include the newest babies. And there, among the names, was mine. Written in the same careful script as the others, placed exactly where it should have been all along. My parents stood beside it, a little awkward, waiting for me to react. The room was quiet. Everyone knew the history. Everyone remembered what had happened years earlier. I walked up to the painting, studied it for a long moment, then turned to them and simply said, "Thank you." And that was it. No speeches, no tears, no demand for explanations, just acknowledgement. Because the truth was, I didn't need their tree anymore. I had my own. But letting them put my name back wasn't about me. It was about them finally facing what they'd done. And if that gave them peace in their later years, I was willing to let them have it. The real revenge, though, wasn't in the name being restored. It was in the way the family treated me afterward. The relatives who once brushed me off now leaned in to ask about my work. Cousins quoted lines from my book, telling me they'd given copies to their friends. My parents, once skeptical and dismissive, started showing genuine interest, clumsy at times but real. They couldn't erase the years of exclusion, but they also couldn't deny who I had become. And here's the quiet satisfaction. I didn't achieve any of it to prove them wrong. I achieved it because I refused to let their rejection define me. That was the calmest revenge of all, living so fully, so authentically that their attempt to erase me only made me stronger. Years later, when people ask me about that painting, I smile. I tell them it's a nice piece of art, but it doesn't define me. Because family trees on canvas are just symbols. What matters is the life you actually live, the connections you nurture, the roots you grow through kindness, work, and resilience. I used to think revenge meant getting even, but I've learned that real revenge, lasting revenge, is simply refusing to be diminished. It's standing tall, quietly, until the world sees you for who you really are. And the best part? You don't need to raise your voice. You just keep growing, branch by branch, until no one can ignore the tree you've become. So yes, my name is on that family tree now. But honestly, the name that matters most is the one I've carved for myself. Because at the end of the day, your worth isn't given by anyone else. Not parents, not siblings, not paintings on a wall. Your worth is in how you live, what you build, and the legacy you create for yourself. And that's a truth no one can erase. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt erased or overlooked, remember this. Your calm, steady growth can be the most powerful response of all. Revenge doesn't have to be loud or cruel. Sometimes the quiet kind, the kind that builds you up instead of tearing others down, is the kind that lasts forever. Thank you for listening to this calm revenge story. If you enjoyed it, I'd love for you to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to My Calm Revenge for more stories like this. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply living well.